Hello everybody, we have a bit of an interesting video here today, and we're going to talk about whether or not it's time to stick a fork in the Florida Panthers and their playoff hopes. Now before we start, please make sure to subscribe to my channel if you are new to my channel, new to hockey, whatever the case may be. I'd love to have you here along the way as I try to do this as a career. Now let's talk about Florida. The Panthers are coming off their best season in franchise history, setting the club record for wins with 58 and points with 122 in a season, and of course winning their first ever President's Trophy in franchise history this past season. Then they would go on to win their first playoff series in multiple decades as they beat the Washington Capitals in the first round before ultimately losing, bowing out to their in-state rivals, the Tampa Bay Lightning, in the second round. Now, we are seeing where they're at now in the 2022-2023 season. And yeah, of course, some things have happened along the way before we get to where we are now. Big thing being Jonathan Huberdeau and Mackenzie Weegar being gone in exchange for Matthew Tkachuk. I almost said Brady Tkachuk there. But yeah, that was a big deal, as well as management deciding to bring in Paul Maurice as the head coach instead of interim head coach Andrew Brunette, who was very good when he was there in Florida this past season. Now you can kind of see where the Panthers are after all this movement, all this drama. They currently sit at 18, 19, and 4 through 41 games. They have 40 points in 41 games and are 5th in their division after previously, of course, winning their division. So, is their season really over? Well, it's going to be a very, very difficult path to the playoffs. MoneyPuck.com has their playoff odds at 18.8%. So, pretty low that they would make the postseason. And this is where you're actually shocked, because you have teams like the Buffalo Sabres, which I said would probably finish like 7th in the division, in 4th. Tage Thompson, among others, have been a big reason for that. But you're looking at the Atlantic and realizing there are favorites in that division, and there are surprise teams, kind of like the Buffalo Sabres. So Florida is looking at this, realizing not only is it going to be an uphill grind, but it's very well probably going to have to be as a wild card team that they make the playoff run if they're able to do so. Why? Well, because the Bruins are basically unbeatable right now. Toronto has been very, very good, and the third place Lightning have almost a double-digit point lead over the Panthers, and they also have 2 games in hand over Florida, meaning that the Atlantic is probably not going to be winnable for the Cats this season, and actually, according to MoneyPuck.com, they have a 0% chance. Makes sense, especially with how good Boston's been, especially at home. But in general, they've just been amazing. But is this over? Is the season over? Not just yet. The team does have a chance, but it's also going to have to really be a good run by the squad, because most of the teams in front of them, in fact, I think 2 of the 4 at least, have games in hand, and then everybody, of course, has more points than them right now. You're looking at teams like the Buffalo Sabres, Pittsburgh Penguins. They have games in hand, and then you have the 2 teams above them right now in the Washington Capitals and New York Islanders. What is going to have to change along the way if Florida is to make the playoffs, make the wild card, whatever the case may be? The big thing is going to be goaltending right now. These stats are not up to date. They are off by 1 game, but they are pretty much up to date. And as of right now, when I did the notes, the Panthers had the 10th worst save percentage in the league, and in general haven't looked terrible defensively, but they haven't looked great either. I really do think that they could be missing Mackenzie Weegar a lot, and they are somewhere towards the middle of the pack usually, or kind of towards that bottom 10 for certain stats. So defensively, yeah, not exactly great, and it doesn't help either that their goalies have not been lighting the world on fire. Sergei Bobrovsky and Spencer Knight were hoping to be this dynamic duo to come into the season. Bobrovsky, a very experienced goalie that has had a lot of big moments, won a Vezina, being that guy that was paid to do well in Florida. They want him to do well. Knight being an early pick and a guy that people have a lot of hopes for the future. You're hoping that the veteran can do well while also training the young guy. And this is really not exactly how it's going. The problem is that really probably Spencer Knight needs to be your starter as of right now. But like I've said before, with Sergei Bobrovsky's contract being so big, that's probably why he gets starts more often, because it would make management and the higher-ups look really bad to have the goalie of Bobrovsky's caliber, but also his pay, to be on the bench. It wouldn't look very good for them. regardless of not whether or not they sign that deal. And the Russian goalie actually has played the 23rd most games by attendee in the league and had the 16th worst goals saved above average in the league at negative 6.61, meaning that an average goalie would save about 7 more goals against than Bob. His high danger save percentage is also awful, being at 788, which is 11th worst in the league. And yes, while he has faced a lot of high danger shots against compared to other goalies that have logged 1,000 minutes this season, he still has to make some stops with the money he's making. And it's not just him either. Other guys need to step up as well. Sam Reinhart, probably a name that sticks out to you, a guy that averaged over a point per game last season. And then, of course, his stats have dropped off a little bit. But I'd say that probably Sam Bennett would be that guy you would say really needs to step up and help out the team more. I've been critical of Bennett in the past, and I know that last year was really a year that people said this is what he could have been in Calgary, but I would say as of right now, he is going to have to help his team out. You look at his normal numbers, and heck, even some of his analytics, they don't look necessarily terrible, but EvolvingHockey.com has him as the least valuable player on Florida this season. And when you kind of look at some of his analytics, you realize that him playing with Matthew Tkachuk, Brendan Matuer, those guys probably do help out his analytics and his numbers in general. So I would say for Bennett, while his stats don't look terrible, if you are going to play a lot of minutes with Matthew Tkachuk and guys like that, you probably need to be able to elevate your play a little bit. But I really don't think Bennett is the guy that people are hoping he would be compared to last season. And I'm still kind of critical of the value that he has. Not of him as a player. I think that he could be a very big-time fan favorite, but in general, I don't think he is as valuable as people see him as. And it's not just one player holding them back either. I want to say that because hockey is probably the biggest team sport that you can think of out of the big 4 sports. Football, you can win with a really good quarterback. Basketball is the easiest sport to win with one really good player. Not so much now with the way that people are teaming up with these super teams. And baseball, obviously that's a pretty big team sport as well, but it's not just going to be one player making it or breaking it. If that was the case, Connor McDavid would have as many Stanley Cups as he's wanted at this point. But I will say, I think that right now a big thing holding them back is their coaching. Paul Maurice is a guy that I wondered if it was a mistake to bring him in. He left Winnipeg not getting the desired results, and Rick Bowness came in and seems to be leading that team just fine. Maurice is a guy that has a long-standing legacy in the league as being a guy that gets teams to the playoffs, but outside of 1 or 2 runs, he really doesn't have a whole lot to say, oh, this is what I can, bring to the table. 2002 run with the Canes, of course, that is probably his biggest run, and it has to be. In fact, I think it's his only trip to the Cup. And then that 2018 run with the Jets was a big one there. But in general, I don't think he's a guy that I would say you have to have him. And I really would have said Brunette would have been the guy I would have wanted to bring back for a year, because Florida just did really well with him, and he deserved a second chance. If you're going to bring in Maurice, I just really didn't feel like that was a fit for me. But having rambled on about this, what are my thoughts on this as well for the Panthers, and kind of where do I see them being? Do I see them making the playoffs? I don't. As of right now, I think that they are just a little bit too far into a hole right now, and I think that they aren't going to have enough time to dig themselves out. Yeah, a really hot run could fix a lot of things, but along the way you got to think of injuries that could happen. You have to think of the fact that other teams have just as many games. They're going to have to do worse than you. You're going to have to do better than them. And you're probably going to have to hope it as a wild card spot if you are going to do that. The Washington Capitals are getting guys like Backstrom and Wilson back. I think they just got them back yesterday. The Islanders are not the group that I think a lot of people thought they'd be. They're doing better than a lot of people, including myself, thought they would be. Pittsburgh is Pittsburgh. Buffalo with Tage Thompson looks more invigorated as a franchise. Got a lot of exciting pieces there. And in general, I worry, especially about Bobrovsky and Maurice, how all this is going to work. And I don't exactly think that the Panthers are in a great spot to make the playoffs. And I just feel like this team is right back to where they were long ago, or not that long ago, where they're able to score goals, but not keep them out of the back of their net. But we will see. What do you think will happen here for the Florida Panthers? Do you think they'll make the playoffs? Do you think that they'll miss the playoffs? Do you think they'll, make it as a top 3 in their division? Do you think they'll make it as a wild card? What will be the case? How will this happen one way or the other? And, what do you think will go from there? Anyway, everybody, please make sure to like this video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you're new. Everybody stay safe. Have a great night, and you go love hockey, all right? Goodbye, Brigadiers and Brigadettes. This is your captain signing off. Have a great night.